Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. For this week, I just checked the Google Doc right before the session around 2 p.m. I don't find any questions there for the lecture. So I would assume either you guys are doing okay, or maybe you haven't got there yet. If the latter, then I would really encourage you to catch up, as soon as you can. It's an online course. You don't really want to leave yourself behind for too long for the weekly items. All right, but it's okay. We don't have anything on the schedule to discuss, but I would be happy to answer any question you might have if you throw the question to me right away, right? So I'll open the floor. If you got any questions related to not just this week, if you got any question related to lectures or tutorials, now will be the time to ask. Okay, I will wait a bit to see if anybody got any questions.
Hi, Professor.
Hi, go ahead, please.
Actually, I want to know, I just checked the solution that you posted in E-class for lab 1 and 2.
Yeah.
I want to know, we needed to write exact code that you sent us, or we can get the other approaches for solve the problem?
Yeah, if I understood correctly, you were asking, should you actually follow the way I solved the problem? The answer would be
Yes.
no. The answer is no. The answer is no. So I would say, okay, so your fellow student's question was about, so when we gave you, I call them example solution, right? Example solutions. Meaning that you should really try to compare that against with your solution, okay? But I would say if both solution pass all the grading tests, for example, for your lab 1 and lab 2, if both solution pass all the tests given to you, I would say they're equally good. However, if you believe, for example, let's say when you compute a text or when you compute the BMI, if you believe the way you tackle the problem might be a bit too excessively long for your for the lines of code you have written, in that case, you may want to consider maybe for the example solution. I try to keep things as tidy as possible. So I think it's just a way for you to think about how things might be done, but you don't need to follow exactly that. You don't need to. I think in some way writing a program is more like writing an essay, right? No two students or no two programmers are the same. So I would say just as a reference point only.
Great.
Okay. Yeah. So if you, for example, you might find my solution there maybe a little bit too, in some way too simple. Simple in the sense that you would prefer maybe to solve it, maybe using a little bit more if statements, maybe a little bit more, maybe later on using maybe more loops later. In that case, I would say that's okay. I think when you write a program, the most important thing is, number one, it should be correct, of course. It should pass all the test cases. And number two, it should be good enough for your understanding. If somehow you follow somebody else's solution, but somehow you without understanding exactly how things work, it's not the way to go. Okay. So if you actually try to follow the example solution I made available to you, if you're wondering about how a particular part, why it would be the case, the best way to speak to me would be speak to me in the office hour, and I'll be happy to discuss with you. Right.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good. All right. Any other questions?
Sorry, I have another one.
Yeah, please go ahead, and then I will go on to the chat.
Actually, about the practice test one that you sent us, and you sent the solution as well, I want to know, we need to write the code in a console app because it's empty.
Okay, so for your, so there's a little bit about the programming test number one. Okay, so about your programming, so your programming test number one. Okay, so you will be given utilities for sure. You will be given the test utilities. So these two are mandatory, in the sense that for the utilities, you have to implement whatever methods you assign to implements, right? You got to implement the methods. And then for the test utilities over here, we gave you some tests, some. As I explained in the guides for your programming test number one, so we will give you some tests for you to get started with. And then there will be more tests. Once you submit your code, more tests to grade submission. So what that means is it will be optional but recommended. Okay, what that means is you should try more input value on your code.
You mean additional unit tests?
Additional unit tests. Yes, that's correct.
Great.
Yeah. More input value on the tests. And then let me try to be just accommodating all the possibility for everybody. So when I say try more input value over here, so this can be done either by more JUnit tests. This will be something I would recommend. In some way, it's quite easy. All you got to do is you can simply copy and paste one of the test cases I gave to you for that particular method. All you got to do is to modify the expected value and also the input value for calling the methods. That's all you got to do, and make sure that one also passes. Like add as many as you like. Okay, that'll be option number A. That'll be option A. Option B would be if for those of you who really prefer using a console application, that's okay. You know, if you really prefer, for the more tests, you can try to use the app.java. So this will be the console application class that we also give to you. However, what we give to you will be exactly what's like the in the practice test. We only give you the main method with the scanner declared, and then exactly how to prompt the user for maybe a string, maybe for an integer, or maybe for a double value, and then how you call the utility methods. For that part, you will have to complete by yourself, should you choose to do it. But I think by just using the utilities and also the JUnit test, it would be sufficient for you to finish the test and hopefully score high marks. That's what I hope. Okay. And of course, let me say a little bit more. When you try to write more JUnit tests, or when you try to pass at least the tests that we gave to you, anytime when you face any test that actually failed, as we said in the labs, you have to go under the failure trace in the JUnit panel. Double click on that. That will show you. That one will show you to you exactly what your program, what your method actually return. For example, let's say the result is expecting some string, but your return string actually is missing a comma. Let's say, for example. So that's how you can decide how you can modify your method accordingly. Okay. And then, of course, for the more simplistic cases, if you really cannot spot the error just by your eyes, in that case, you may have to use the debugger, which we also emphasize since week number 2. All right. So does that answer your question about the what you're given?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good.
And it's this practice test counts for marks?
No, it doesn't. The practice test does not count for marks. I think the reason we gave it to you was because we just want to get yourself familiar with the workflow. You know, you have to download the test. You gotta import the projects. You have to do the task and also export the project, upload the project, and also submit. We just want you to get familiar with all the process. That's the main reason.
Great, thank you very much.
All right, very good. All right, any other questions you want to speak up before I move on to looking at the chat? Is it Zuhair? You don't need to raise hand, just speak up. That's okay. Zuhair? I can see your hands raised, but I can just speak up if you got questions. You don't have a mic. In that case, do you want to just type your questions? That might be easier. Otherwise, there's no, yeah, just type, okay. Before anybody speak up, let me look at the chat very quickly. One question from Hunter, okay. Do we have to assume that the user input is correct? I would say when you read the instruction for your test, it will be explicit about whether you can assume if the user input is correct. For example, let's say if you want to calculate the BMI, let's say, right? You have to enter, let's say, the weights for some user. The method, the instruction might say you can assume the number entered for the weight is always positive, in which case you don't have to do any error messages. Or it could be phrased the other way to say, in this case, if the user input for the weights is actually negative, in that case you have to you have to return some error message. So I would say don't assume anything. So you just have to read the instruction. Usually the instruction will be very clear about what you should really assume for error handling. All right. One question from Rosie. I believe that might be the question from week number 3 lecture. Okay. What's the difference between over here, not A conjunction with B, and also not A and not B? All right. Before I give my take, anybody wants to give a try? What's the relationship between these two? Is there any logical relation between these two? Anybody? If you want to share your inputs, just speak up. Is there any logical relation between these two expressions here?
They're
Let's look right
different.
here. And 2. Yeah, say it again.
They are different.
They're different. Okay, so you're saying that there should be no logical relationship between them, right? Is that what you meant?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, let me ask you a little bit further. What about De Morgan? Do you think 1 and 2 can actually somehow illustrate De Morgan?
Yes.
Yes. So you're saying that somehow this number 1 is equivalent to this?
No.
Are you saying they're equivalent? Or
No.
you want to say this is equivalent to not the case this?
I'm not saying either of those things. But they are both relevant to De Morgan's laws, but they're different.
But okay, so you're saying they're different, but somehow they're also related to De Morgan. How exactly are they related to De Morgan? What was your thought?
If you use De Morgan's law on the first one, it's
Mhm.
going to be not A or
Okay.
not B.
Very good. Okay. And what about the second one?
It's going to be not bracket open A or B bracket close.
All right, very good. I'm very happy to actually hear this. Very good, thank you. All right. So let me go back to Rosie's question. So if you look at only this and only this, right? So these two are not really related to by De Morgan because you cannot say that the this is simply equivalent to this. It's not the case, right? Because you can see this is conjunction rather than disjunction. De Morgan tells you that if you try to distribute the negation over to conjunction, you have to change over here to disjunction. I remember maybe one of you guys actually asked this in the forum actually last week, pretty early in the lecture. I was very pleased to see that question there. So you can read this is related to this by De Morgan. All right. So notice that conjunction to disjunction. So this is by De Morgan. Similarly, you can think about this is like applying the negation to some disjunction over here, right? That's also what we said in the lecture. However, if you try to see 1 and 2, they are not related. All right, Rosie, I hope that's okay. All right. Okay, got some question from, oh, you guys say the week number 4 Google Doc does have some questions. Okay, not when I check it. I'll get to Google Doc in just a moment. We do have some question on the chat quickly. For the programming test, are we expected to write 5 additional unit tests? I'm not sure why where the 5 magic number comes from. As I just explained over here, you should really try to write unit tests yourself. However, when we grade your submission, we do not grade any additional JUnit tests you might have written. If you simply write nothing additional for JUnit tests, you wouldn't get any penalty. All right. If you're confident enough that actually your implementation for the utility methods is just correct, in that case you might be okay. However, I would say if you're a beginner, maybe you're not as careful as you could be. In that case, you may just want to write some additional tests. How many more should you write? I would say it depends on your judgment, right? If you believe maybe you believe the tests we gave to you are missing some input, right? In that case, you should really test those inputs. How many should you write? There's no fixed number. I would say that as many as you think that's necessary. All right. The practice test does not count for marks, right? I just mentioned that for AV. All right, I just mentioned to your fellow students already. Okay, from Su here. Okay, I was wondering, I had handed in lab 2 as a draft, but I don't think I ever click on the submit instead of issue. All right, so Su here, but I would say number 1. So the instruction has actually said you should really click on the submit button, right? So you should really make sure you click on that, right? Maybe you forgot, maybe I'm not sure, so maybe you didn't read the instruction, but I would say you should really make sure you click on the submit button. I will look into this for lab number 2. I think you might be okay, but please make sure you follow the instruction, right? Well, there's a reason we give you instructions, so you can actually make sure you can minimize trouble like this, all right? Okay, for Michael, I think you're just responding to your fellow student question about the Morgan's question. Okay, very good. Okay, I think AV here is also trying to help understand the fellow student question. Okay, that's fine. For Umair, so for the programming test, we only have to change the utility. Yes, that's correct. I would say the only class that the only class you must change will be utilities. You must. However, for the test utilities, whether to add more test cases to there is completely up to you. If you don't feel the need, you don't need to add it. But I would say typically you should add maybe some more test cases. Okay. And then for the app.java, similar idea. I would say if you want to simply test your program with the input-output from the console, you can do so, but it's not required. So the only class you're required to change will be utilities. That's the only one. From Mark, will stuff seen on lab number 3 be seen on the programming test? No, I don't think so. Lab number 3 is already about loop. So I think for lab number 1 and lab number 2 already only. Okay, so for programming test number 1, it's only about elementary programming and also the next like if statements. So if you look at the programming test number 1 guide, I think I explained there very clearly already. So you may want to read it over. Just make sure you don't miss any important detail. So it will be something things you have seen in lab number 1 and also lab number 2. For lab number 3, which is due on this Friday, I think that one there will start to help you learn about loops. That's also a very important topic, which we'll do next later. All right. All right, still here. You're welcome. So please, yeah, just make sure you follow the instruction. That'll be great. Very good. For Michael, I don't know if this was asked in the Google Doc already, but I think there is an error in the De Morgan's law, conjunction example 3 in the notes. Sure. Let's take a look. So Michael, do you know which slides, which slide number? Yeah, you said example 3. I might be able to find it rather easily, but let's see. Okay, you know what? I'm going to show the slide here, Michael. Help me out. So Michael, do you have the mic? You can just speak up.
Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you. Please, where?
Oh, perfect. Okay, I'm back.
Yes. Okay, De Morgan, right? Oh, De Morgan should be, I think, before that. Okay.
A lot sooner. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
It was the iPad notes.
Oh, iPad notes. Sure, no problem. Good. So it should be this guy here. Yes.
Yes.
No problem.
Thank you.
De Morgan law, conjunction or disjunction?
Conjunction.
Conjunction.
Oh, sorry. Wait. Yeah. Let's try conjunction first.
Sure. Oh, example 3 is this one here.
Yes. When you made the equivalent statements on the right, I don't think the statement the expression in an orange is right.
The orange over there. I less than or equal to. Oh, you mean here, right? Okay, I agree. You should be 10.
Yes.
Is that what you meant? Okay, Michael, very good catch. You know what? I am reasonably confident. You know, I admit it's a mistake for sure. For sure. However, I suspect when because sometimes I'm trying to write while I'm speaking. Maybe when I say in the words verbally, maybe I said I less than or equal to 10, but I actually wrote 0. That's most likely the case.
Okay, but then in that case, the number line doesn't make any sense then.
The number line, it would be larger than or equal to 0. Okay, interesting. You know what, Michael, this is a very good point. Very good point. You know what? Let me take a note of this, and then I can definitely make a fix. Let me redo this one here. What about that? And then let me redo this. Okay, very good.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Yeah.
No problem. You know, I do appreciate you correct my mistake. I do appreciate that. Just give me one moment. I'm going to redo this example. I don't want to confuse anybody. Okay, very good. Guys, just bear with me a few moments. Let me retrieve that particular page. That should be example number 3. Okay, I'm getting there. Okay, there we go. Okay, and then I'm going to copy that page. And then, okay, that's good. Very good. All right. Let me now go back to my iPad over here. All right, that's this example here. All right. Well, guys, very quickly, okay, in case you have seen this, just bear with me because I do want to correct a mistake. You can see over here, this is the branching condition we are talking about over here. Okay, so let's answer this question here. When is action number 2 executed? Okay, we know that action number 2 will be executed over here if we get to the else part. And for a single if statement, we know by definition, we only get to the else part if the if branching condition here evaluate to false, right? Otherwise, we would have just executed action 1 and then bypass the rest, right? So now, the question would, the answer would be, we get to action number 2 if it is not the case, the if branching condition, which is I less than 0 and also I larger than 10. And we just did De Morgan a few moments ago. Let's just make sure I do that correctly this time. So this will be equivalent to, so not a case that both this and this. It will be either this is not the case or this is not the case. Okay, so far so good. And the mistake I made was starting from this step over here. That will be equivalent to when we applied the negation to the relation. That will be the logical law for the negation. So the first one will be I larger than or equal to 0. Or, so this would be I less than or equal to 10. I less than or equal to 10, right? So these are the two. Let's see how we can visualize this. Let's say I larger than or equal to 0 is going to be like that. And then I less than or equal to 10 is like that. All right. So now you can see that what we are doing here is or disjunction, which means we're going to take the union of these two, the green bar and also orange bar. So that means it's going to include everything over here. So this will just be equivalent to true. All right. So the conclusion, Michael, will be the same. So we still got the else part will just be true, actually. So this will just be true. It will be the same. Actually, if you look at the actual slides, actually I did put I less than or equal to 10. I think just when I did the illustration, I said it wrong. But the conclusion will be the same.
So, Professor, are you saying that action 1 will never be executed since it's always
That's
false?
correct. That's correct. If you think about for action number 1, let's try this just on the same number line. For action number 1, let me just try this. Use different color here. Let's say we got I less than 0. It's going to be strictly less than 0, which is this pink line over here. And meaning that we're going to take intersection. I larger than 0 over here, strictly larger than 0, which means it's going to be something like this, right? So now if you look at this number line here and this line number here, are we able to take any value that's going to satisfy both at the same time? The answer should be no, because they don't intersect. They are mutual. They are simply disjoint from each other. Okay, so that's why over here, you will see that's simply just false. Yeah, Michael, makes sense to you?
Perfect. Thank you, Professor.
No problem. So guys, I would say you may not get into trouble by still struggling a little bit, about this kind of logic. For the programming test, you're okay, right? Because for the programming test, I think as long as you know how to really combine, for example, logical conjunction for specifying interval, or maybe for disjunction, for to say, let's say, remember in the tutorial video, we say, let's say passing grade is either to get A or B or C, and etc. You can use logical disjunction. As long as you know how to use those cases, you'll be safe for the programming test. However, when we get to the written test, which I will try to speak to you a little bit about, even though we still got 10 days before your written test, but I want to get you started as soon as possible. For your written test, that's going to happen next Wednesday, not the coming Wednesday, but next Wednesday. You will be expected to know such stuff quite naturally, right? That's something we will expect you to do, all right? But we still got some Q&A session later, so you can still ask me or just come to my office hour. Right, Michael, thank you for pointing this out. I think that's really good. Okay. Okay, let me see if there's any more question on the chat. It seems like I answered everything on the chat. Let me go to Google Doc. Okay, so maybe your fellow students simply put it maybe after the session started. All right, let's see this. If I go to the Google Doc, let's see. Maybe this question was already answered. Maybe. Let's try. Okay, nothing under general. Okay, not here, not here. Okay, I believe this one here was already answered. Right, I already answered that. It was from Rosie, so I think already answered that. So Rosie, if you got any follow-up question to this, feel free to speak up, right? Otherwise, I think we answered that already, right? All right, good. Let me just make a note, otherwise I'll forget. Very good. All right, just copy that. Okay, nothing. All right, so I think Google Doc is clean. All right, everything has been answered. All right, any more questions for me?
Professor, may I ask a question about your approach to solving problems in Java?
So related to the test or to just in general?
I guess the test, because I guess
the test.
time
Sure.
condition.
Yeah. What do you want to ask, please?
I just want to ask, because when I was doing the projects, or like the labs, lab 1 and lab 2, when I was solving those problems and filling the code in the utilities, I didn't really have a way of like approaching it. When like, for example, when I did the rock paper scissors lab, I just wrote some code and I wrote around that piece of code until I got something that worked. But I was wondering if there's like a better method that is a bit more efficient and a bit more conducive to the to the upcoming programming test.
Yeah, I would say for the programming test, I can talk about maybe one. Let's just give you one example, right? Not really the actual question, but something similar. Okay, let's say if you got public static string. Let's say, for example, sorry. Let's say that one there. I'll just get let's say get area. Okay, just make it simple, but I'll illustrate my point. Get area over here, and then maybe you get a double over here, WR for radius. Okay, what you will be given will be the string result is empty string, and then at the end you simply say return the result. That's what you get. Of course, you got some commentary, around, just telling you how things like the requirements, what you shouldn't do, what you should do, things like that, right? Anyway, so what you're supposed to do is basically this part over here, right? You got to implement some lines of code over here. I would say the following, okay? Of course, the problem itself can be much more. It can be way harder than get area because get area is really trivial. Up to now, I would say step number one. Okay, step number one. Always, you want to read the comments for the method. So I think just on top of that, we're going to have several lines of comments over here. We're going to explain what the method is supposed to do. I would say number one, make sure you understand what the problem you're trying to solve. Number one, okay? So you will understand what the problem is. Number two, don't start coding just yet, right? So maybe spend about as long as is needed in order for you to understand what the comments are really saying. Because if you don't understand what the problem is, there's no way for you to solve it properly, right? Number one. Number two, you should really go over the input tests for this particular method in the JUnit test. Go over the JUnit test. Typically, we'll give you between 5 to maybe less than 10 test cases. We wouldn't give you so many, but that will be enough for you to get an idea how to test your method, right? So you can later also add your own test cases as well. So between 5 to less than 10. And then you want to go over these test cases so that you can see how the input is related to the output, right? There might be some cases where you have to print out error messages. And there might be some cases where the inputs are valid, but you're going to calculate in a particular way. And maybe the string return value maybe should be, you can see, should be a period at the end, or maybe there should be a comma, in the middle, right? You want to pay attention to details like this. Once you got an idea, you can start coding to really do, right? I would say when you do the coding, you may just want to focus on the test case one by one. Maybe you can try to see in order to pass test number one, what should I do? Maybe test 01, for example, is only to say you're going to print out an error message to say error radius must be positive, right? If that's what you have for test number one from the expected value, then maybe you should want to say over here, if r strictly less than 0, in that case, the result over here should be reassigned to maybe whatever error message it is, right? And then as soon as you're done, without going any further, rerun all the JUnit tests and make sure at least you can pass that one. And then once you pass that one, you can go on to the next one. All right. So Michael, does that help a little bit about how to solve the problem?
So Professor, are you saying that for the JUnit test, you would recommend us trying to do it sequentially rather than doing
doing sequentially would be okay. I think typically I try to give you, I try to arrange them maybe in groups. Maybe the first group will be about error messages only. So I think usually error messages should be the easiest one to print out because all you got to do is do some conditional to say maybe if one of the numbers you're given is actually negative, in that case, you're going to print out a particular error message. And else if maybe the number is larger than a particular upper bound, and then you should really print out another message, something like that. And then after the group for the error test cases, you can now go to when the inputs are valid, what you should do to do the calculation.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Will we gain at least part marks if we meet some of the JUnit tests, or is it that we're expected to do all of them?
Oh, okay. Okay, I see. Yeah, the answer is yes, you will get part marks. Okay. You will, okay, let's say, for example, let's say you're given, I'm not saying the exact number, I'm just giving you one example. Let's say for this particular method, let's say for this get area over here, let's say you are actually given, for example, you're given 5 tests. And then there might be some additional tests which will test you, once you submit your code, we might give some additional 4, for example, right? If it turns out that you actually pass 3 test cases in total, let's say, hopefully many more. In that case, you will definitely get a part marks for whatever test you have passed, for sure. So we'll start with maybe just by equally distributes the weights. So that means you will get maybe 3 divided by 5 plus 4. So that will be the percentage you will get for this particular test. Yeah. So you wouldn't be getting any part marks just for a single unit test. It's either pass or fail. But you will definitely get for whatever for each test you actually pass, you definitely get marks for that, for sure.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Guys, we'll see how your first programming test will go. But I would say, okay, I can tell you that, I'm not trying to give you panic. No need to panic. We're going to do this 4 times. So we want you to find the best way. Or maybe to be more precise, you want to find the best way for you to adjust, to maybe to code, maybe under a little bit pressure. I think that's also necessary as part of the learning outcomes. So I think on Wednesday or Thursday, depending on when you would want to take the test, the method that you are seeing, you might see some, for some method, you might see lots of similarity to your lab, maybe. Maybe for some questions, you may not have seen them before, right? So I would say do the ones you're confident first to get as many as you can. And then after that, you should, for the method you haven't seen before, that's why I said you don't want to really panic. There's no need to panic during the test. It's going to help. It's not going to help. What will help is you want to read the comments for the method which you don't know too much about to see what the problem really is. Once you understand what the problem is, you want to go over the JUnit test to see what the expected input and output behavior should be. And then you can try to program. That would be my suggestion. All right.
Professor, just
Okay.
one other question
Yes.
about the test. So like in the second lab, I'm pretty sure it was, where we were given the rock, paper, scissors. So there was the tie outcome. Will we for sure have, if there's possibly an outcome like that in one of the test methods, will there for sure be some in the JUnit test, an example of it saying tie, or will we have to like figure out that it should say tie in this scenario,
Okay.
even though it doesn't show it?
Let me answer it a little bit more generally over here. So you're basically saying, let's say for a particular method, let's say the method's return value is actually a string, right? It's going to be a string. Let me just write it down. It's going to be a string over here. And of course, there might be many kinds of string values your method should return. So I would say in the test that we give to you, we'll try to show you as many as we can. So for those that string value that we didn't show to you, they are simply similar to what have been illustrated already. For example, in your particular case, let's say we can say either player A wins, or it could be player B wins, and then also tie. So in this case, because tie is a very special case, I think for the tie, like a special string that you should really print out, we'll definitely show you one case about the tie. And then whether the player 1 wins or the player 2 wins, we don't necessarily show you both cases. We might just show you one case to say, okay, this case, one of the players win. But you, at the same time, you also want to write some additional test cases to make sure your program also works if the other player wins. But for the tie, specifically like what you asked, yes, we'll give to you. So that's something we want to make sure you also be aware that there's such an output that's necessary for the tie.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Okay. From Sai, how many methods are we going to implement for the test? Between 3 and 4. Okay. Between 3 and 4 methods. Okay, no problem. I can tell you that between 3 and 4, they are not necessarily ordered in the difficulty level. So I would say skim through the methods that you're supposed to implement. Let's say you're given 3 methods. Skim through them very quickly about which one you feel comfortable to do first. You don't have to say, do the first method that professor gave to me and then do the second one. No, you don't need to, all right? So you want to do the one you feel the most comfortable, and then you don't want to get stuck in a particular method without finishing it for more than, let's say, 20 minutes, right? If you have to get stuck in methods for more than 20 minutes without making any progress, you should really try to switch to others before you go back later, all right? But 3 to 4 methods. We'll see how this goes. Guys, it's the very first one. So both me and the instructor from session 0, we try to design the question together. We'll see how that goes for everybody. If it turns out to be too easy, or maybe the other way around, we'll try to adjust maybe later. Okay, we'll see how that goes, right? So don't worry, it's just the first one, right?
Professor?
Yeah. Yes, please go ahead.
So on the test, is there going to be like three to four methods that you want us to write down on Eclipse?
Yeah, so when I say 3 to 4, I meant there will be about 3 to 4 utility methods like this, where you have to implement the body of the method, like over here. That's what I meant, 3 to 4. And then, of course, for each method we give to you, there will be between 5 to 10 JUnit tests we'll give to you to begin with, so you can focus on those to start with. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Professor, may I ask one more question? Or
Hey, as many as you like, Michael.
okay, I was wondering. Going back to, I was wondering. Well, my question is, how, like if our code is clean, or if it's like really long and drawn out, if that will somehow affect our grade. Because I remember doing the rock paper scissors lab.
Yeah. So Michael,
I didn't want to inundate it with too many if statements.
No problem. So Michael's question was, so will the structure of your code, does that impact the marks? Does it impact? The answer is no. So you don't really have to aim for the cleanest or the shortest lines of code you can ever write. That's not a focus for the test. So the focus of the test will be, given the problem and also given some example tests, you will be able to program a method that's as correct as possible. Okay, how many lines of code you may have to use is not something we will be picky about. So for example, let's say you might, I can, well, I'm not sure if this might help. I can tell you that, at least from my side, one of the methods I ask you guys to implement, it can be solved in the short way, or it can be solved in the long way. It can be solved in the long way. So long way, maybe it will take about maybe several tens of lines of code, maybe 20 lines or 30 lines. But in the short way, maybe reduced to half. However, I would say when you are thinking about how to solve the method, right? If you got one solution that you believe is surely going to work, however, it might be a little bit ugly, or it might be a little bit too long, I would say, don't worry, just program that, just make it work. That's just for the test. However, later on, since you will be downloaded the copy into your local machine, I think that's a very good advantage for you, since we're running this course online. So once you get the your test question, maybe after the test, you can feel free to try it out yourself to try to maybe polish that. But I would say during the test, you're not aiming to write the shortest lines of code for the solution. All you need to focus on will be to write something that can pass the test. Okay. So Michael, does that answer your question?
Great, thank you.
Very good. Yeah. Oh, and also something I want to mention very quickly for your programming test too, a similar concern. You might be wondering, so does it really matter if I try to solve the problem using nested loop or nested if statement or maybe triple nested loop when it's not so necessary? I would say as long as your program, number one, terminates, and number two, pass the JUnit test, we don't care whether you actually use some nested loop when unnecessary. That's okay, right? Again, the main focus will be at least you can write under the time pressure you have, which we do appreciate, but at least you can write some correct solution that work. That'll be enough. That's what we are assessing. Okay. All right, guys, any more questions?
Professor, I have another question, if you don't mind.
No problem, go ahead.
I was wondering, because as I was doing lab 2, I was using debug a lot, but then I don't really understand how to use it to the point where I can use it efficiently, because sometimes like I wouldn't pay attention at a certain point, and then when I try to step over, it messes up where I want to get to, and then I needed to terminate the debug. I need to go back to Java perspective and then go back to bug perspective and start all over again. So I just felt like the whole process felt very prolonged and very annoying after a while. But
I think yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I'll let you finish first. Yeah.
But like when you use debug in lectures, it felt very efficient. So I don't know like what I'm doing that's very clunky.
Oh, no problem. I think it's because number one, to be fair, I think the examples which I illustrate in the lecture, they are rather simple. They are not really like a complex methods that would require very conscious mind, to really pay attention to what you're doing. So I would say, and number two, I'm maybe a little bit more experienced than you are of using debugger. That's why I know what I'm doing. So I know exactly where to pay attention to. So there are many things you can do. I would say don't blame yourself too much at all. If you just cannot use debugger as proficient as you might expect yourself to be for your programming test number 1, because you only learned about debugger since about 2 or 3 weeks ago. It does need practice. I think debugger does require some steep, like a steep learning curve for you to get used to. So what Michael you just said to me, I think that's exactly the right thing to do. You want to apply the debugger when you're doing the labs as much as possible. Sometimes it might take you maybe a few runs. Keep trying because you lost the focus. Keep trying and relaunch the debugger. I think that's okay. But if you find that it's really happening over and over, you just feel that yourself is really going with just get lost very easily. I think maybe just speak to me. That'll be the best. Come to my office hour and then tell me which program you're trying to debug, but somehow you're not too sure where you actually got lost. And then I can maybe run the debugger together with you. I think that'll be one way to really help you learn better about debugger. And then also you should really try also the for the lectures. Sometimes I left some input values for you to run the debugger yourself. You can also try those. You can also get more familiar with the process. I think Michael, there's another tip I can give to you. Let's say this. Let's say you got utility method over here. Let's say you already stepped into this particular method. Let's say public static and then method 1, right? Whatever it is. Okay. Let's say this method got many lines of code over here. Okay. Let's say you already managed to get to this particular part, right? Let's say this is where the execution flow is at the moment. Okay. I think what you want to do is remember we're saying that the current execution pause right before we try to execute this line, right? That's what I keep emphasizing. So that means what you should do is when I'm here, try to predict what's going to happen for each line. Okay, for example, maybe this line here, let me make some simple example. Maybe this line is x, some local integer x. Let me write a little bit better.
So basically use the expressions, right?
Use the expression, exactly. Yeah, let me just be a little bit more precise so your fellow student can also benefit. Let's say integer I, okay, that's a parameter. Let's say the first line is simply integer x is assigned to I multiplied by I. That's I squared, let's say. So I would say when your execution flow is right here, before you say step over, predicts what's going to happen. If you believe what's going to happen is x should be assigned to maybe the value of, let's say 49. That's what you believe. And then before that, you can try to predict. So you can put I times I into the, as you said, expressions to see if that's really 49. If it is not, maybe there's something wrong with your calculation. Maybe what you meant to say was not I times I. Maybe what you meant to say was I times I, maybe plus 1. Maybe that's what you meant to say, right? And then after that, you can say step over. And then once you say step over, you can check under variables what the value is for x. If you expect the x to be assigned to 49, make sure that really happened. So I would say it's really important about keep matching between what you expect to happen and what actually happened. So at some point, what you expect to happen will be mismatched by what actually happened. In that case, that's where the bug is. But before that, before you reach that point, you have to be patient to actually get to that point, right? That's the general principle for you.
Okay.
Make sense to you, Michael?
Yes. Is there a way to stay in the debug mode and still edit your code, or do you still recommend to go back to the Java perspective?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I think there's a reason, for Eclipse to show to you there are two perspectives. One is Java, the other one is debugger. I think in theory, you can stay in the debugger perspective and simply edit your code. However, bottom line, you have to make sure you terminate the debugger. You got to click on the stop button, right? Remember, there's a stop button there, like a square over here. Click on that, make sure the program stops before you actually edit the code. Otherwise, Java Eclipse will complain. That's the bottom line. And then, but I would say if you are not in the Java perspective, you will miss the like a console, miss the problems, and miss the outline, miss the package explorer, right? All the good stuff related to the Java perspective. So it may not be so recommended, but you can do it for sure if you feel more comfortable.
Okay.
So there'll be one scenario. There'll be one scenario I think you might want to do it. I myself also do it. I may stay in the debugger perspective if there's only a small change I would like to make right away before I launch the debugger. In that case, maybe I'll make the change right away and then I'll launch the debugger again without switching back to the Java perspective. That might be one scenario you may want to consider. Otherwise, I think you should always switch back to the Java perspective.
Okay.
It's good.
So bottom line, just with regards to the test, like you don't really recommend to use the debugger at this point because we're not that experienced with it, including me.
No, actually, my hope is everybody, you don't really get to the point that you need a debugger. I would say the principle is you only run a debugger when you have no clue what's happening over here. Okay, don't get me wrong. Okay, let's say use debugger. Okay, debugger, you want to use it when you have no clue.
When you're lost, okay.
You're basically just lost, right? So I'm talking about in a broader context. I'm not saying just for your test, also for your labs, and also later once you graduate from the school or maybe from the degree. So whenever you're developing your own code, when you have no clue what's wrong, debugger will be your best friend. It's kind of slow, it's kind of tedious, but that's the only way to find out what you may have overseen. But for the test, if you're able to simply write a code and then without causing any test to fail, that'll be the best case. That I'll say good for you, right? Scenario number two, maybe you thought the test should pass, but somehow it doesn't pass. Maybe just by looking at the JUnit test, the failure trace. If you click on that, it's going to show you the expected versus actual. Sometimes when you see expected versus actual, you might just be able to spot what the problem is. For example, the discrepancy between the two strings is simply that you're missing a comma. Maybe you're missing a semicolon, right, in your output string. In that case, you don't need a debugger to solve it, right? If after you have seen the expected versus actual, you do see the discrepancy, you do see the differences, but you simply don't know where exactly in your code that should cause the problem. In that case, you can try to maybe scan through your code by your eyes very quickly. You're the person who knows your code the best. Maybe you're able to spot it right away. Maybe you are. In that case, that's good. You don't need a debugger. But if none of these actually work, and then you might need a debugger. Unless you give up, of course. Hopefully not, right? All right.
That's all my questions. Thank you, Professor.
No, that's okay. No problem. I'm sure that your fellow student will benefit from that. Sure. Guys,
Professor?
any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I have 3 questions.
Go ahead, please.
Do we have to create console apps in the programming test?
You don't need to. We will give you, as you can see from the programming test, the practice test, we will give to you something called, let me just find it. It's called app.java. I put it somewhere. Okay, anyway, so you will see some class called app.java, right? That's something we'll give to you. You are not required to use it, okay? You will only use it if you really just want to see some output on the console, okay? However, as I explained in the very beginning of the Q&A, so you can simply just do your test without touching the console apps. You can simply focus on just the okay, did I put it somewhere? Give me one moment. Oh yeah, over here, sorry. So app.java is simply optional. You don't need to touch it if you don't want to. All you need will be the utilities and also test utility. These are the only two. Of course, you got to implement your methods inside this class, and then whether to add new test cases will be up to you. Even if you don't add any test cases into the JUnit class, you wouldn't get any penalty. That's okay, right? However, it's recommended that you try some extra input values. Otherwise, how do you know that your class can really pass all possible inputs, right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it answered all my questions. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, no problem. Well, guys, I got a feeling that, of course, you guys are concerned about programming test number 1. I can understand that, but I presume you guys been following through the lectures, and hopefully lectures are clear enough so you don't have many questions. I hope, right? Otherwise, you got to worry about your written test next week. But one thing at a time.
Professor,
Yes.
may I ask why you would rather use nested if statements rather than the conjunctions and disjunctions at that if statement? Because it feels a lot more chaotic, in my opinion.
Is there a particular example you're talking about, or?
I forgot the slide name, but you did the if else.
Oh,
if else,
I
else.
see. I might see which. Let's go there.
Because I understood it, but I just thought, man, that's
Mhm.
that looks different.
Yeah, that's okay. I might know which example you're talking about. Let me just go there. Okay. Sorry, not here. I think there was. Oh yeah, there we go. You think
Yeah.
talking about this example here. Either it's if, else if, or the nested. This might be the one you're talking about.
Yes.
Okay, so I would say, for this particular application, I would definitely go for the left-hand side. It's much simpler. However, for the right-hand side, I would say that one is just another way to do things. You don't need to, but at least you should be aware of that this is just another way of doing solving the same problem, and that's equivalence. And whether to really go for this one or this one, there's no right or wrong. But the left-hand side is definitely much simpler. I agree. But if you maybe sometimes some people might think maybe more naturally this way. They might think I will first of all make sure score is larger than or equal to 80. Otherwise, I will try to do further case analysis over here. And then if that's larger than or equal to 70, otherwise I'll do further analysis. Right? That's maybe some people are maybe tend to think that way. But I would say either way is fine.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay, no problem. All right. When is our midterm test again? Wednesday, Thursday. All right. Check your semester calendar, and then there is a programming test number 1 guide, which was released more than a week ago. Please check it out. That will answer many of your questions. All right. For your labs, for lab 1, you are not required to do any JUnit tests actually for your labs. So we gave you JUnit tests over there to for your lab 1 and lab 2. All you got to do is to pass the JUnit test we gave to you. You don't need to add any additional tests. So Harsh, let's see, Harsmer. So is that what you're asking? So for lab 1, you don't need to do any JUnit test. So I don't think you'll get in any trouble. All right. Okay, no problem. Guys, any more questions? Any more?
Professor, can I ask one more question?
No problem. Go ahead.
I did say that was my last one, but I just thought
No problem.
I haven't gone around to doing all the highly recommended extra videos tutorials.
Oh, you mean the winter 19, the excessively long list? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, I'll let you finish first.
But do you recommend, for the purposes of this test, that is good practice?
Okay. So Michael's question was, since for every for all the weekly Java tutorial and also all the weekly lecture, I mentioned about this winter 19 Java tutorials. Let me show you right away. I think let me just go there. And then I'll answer Michael's question as well. Okay, if you go there, this guy over here, right? Very long list over here. So I would say for your programming test number 1, if you haven't followed through any of these, it might be a little bit too late for the purpose of programming test number 1, right? Because it's basic. Well, unless you got nothing else to do before Wednesday, then you may just want to follow a few more. Maybe after, maybe from now, you may want to plan for your programming test number 2, which will happen soon after the reading week. In that case, you may just want to start going over some tutorial videos for maybe related to arrays and also loops. That might be the best way. For Wednesday and also Thursday, the programming test number 1, you want to make sure, number 1, go over your labs, okay, lab 1 and lab 2, and also go over the code that actually you develop from the tutorial videos in the previous weeks. And also go over the lecture notes for all the examples we talk about. I think that should be enough. And then you just want to maybe practice writing additional programs. I think just make sure you don't really introduce any syntax error, right? So Michael, I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, from Ponit. Soft students competing in post have committed oh. So Pony, I'm not too sure about this. Okay, so you're saying something that happened in U of T, which I'm not really aware of. I can take a look and then I will see what I can do. All right. Okay, from Joseph. Starting from lab number 3, do we have to add additional tests? I think yeah, it's highly recommended. If you look at the instruction for lab 3, you will be your submission will be run against some additional tests. So you may want to add some additional ones for yourself. I think it's also a good practice. We want to encourage you to do. All right. Guys, any more questions? Any more? Anyone? I can wait for 1 more minute. Maybe you guys are okay. I think, let me say it again, on Wednesday and Thursday, after all, it's a programming test, meaning that within those 90 minutes, we want to see what you can complete within the 90 minutes. So I think bottom line, you don't want to create any syntax errors. You don't want to create any type errors. You want to make sure everything compile. And then there will be some, as I said, there will be between 3 and 4 methods as I answer to your fellow student, right? I said 3 and 4. Okay, between 3 and 4. Some of them will be more straightforward than others. So you may just want to tackle with those that you feel comfortable, first of all, to make sure you can pass as many as you can for those methods. There might be some method that might be more difficult than others. It's normal. In that case, maybe you would just have to read the comments for the method carefully and also read through the JUnit test, right, to see exactly what's to be done, and then do your best. All right. Okay, Michael, no problem. Anytime. So AV, you say you got a personal question here. AV, I would say, if you're willing to share with your fellow student, you can ask me in front of them. Otherwise, if you don't feel comfortable, maybe you can drop by my office hour tomorrow. If that's not too late for you, I'll be happy to speak to you in person. It's up to you. So AV, you want to ask me the question now, or maybe you can ask me later? You can just drop by my office hour. Okay, sounds good. Tomorrow. All right. All right, guys. I think seems like everybody seems to be fine. I don't see any new question. Okay. So from Joseph again, each method will come with about between 5 and 10 JUnit tests. May not be exactly 5, but between 5 and 10. Okay. All right. If no further question here, I'm gonna stop the recording now, and then yeah. So good luck, and then if you still have questions, you can come back tomorrow, and then I'll see you tomorrow. All right, guys, take care.
I just have one last question.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Can the nature of the tests be anything, like different inputs, or do we have to change, like if we're like, could it be anything basically?
Sorry, I don't quite follow your question. Do you mind speaking again?
I said, can the nature of the tests be the JUnit test that we add, the additional JUnit tests that we add for the labs be anything?
You mean the nature of the JUnit test? You want to, are you talking about the utility method itself or the JUnit test?
The JUnit tests.
You mean the one you want to add for yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think for the JUnit test you're talking about, let's say for example, okay, let's say you were given a method called is positive, right? Integer and also I, and then that one there simply return a Boolean. Let's say, right, either true or false. Okay, let's say that's the method you're asked to implement. Let's say in the actual JUnit test we gave to you, we simply call is positive. Of course, utility star is positive. If we simply test to say 2, and then we're expecting to see true, let's say that's the only test given to you, right? So now you should really ask yourself, well, since we know that there might be many other possible input that might be given to this method here. For example, that's what's missing here. For example, -4, that's negative, or maybe 0, that's also missing, right? So these are the things you want to also test for yourself to make sure, right? Oh, Sai, thank you. I forgot to switch back. Yeah, let me say it again. Sorry about that. So what I said was, this is the method you have. That's a Boolean method is positive. All right. And then let's say the only test you're given is about 2, which is expected to return true. That's it. So now what you should do is you want to make sure your method can also do things correctly in other inputs. For example, when it is -4, they should also return, they should return false. When it's actually 0, it should also return false, right? Because 0 is not positive, right? Things like that. So I think for your JUnit test, it's up to you whether you want to add them or not. But I think there will be some missing cases that's not really covered by the JUnit test given to you. So that's why you want to consider adding them. Does that answer your question? I hope.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right, guys. I think okay. Seems like everybody's okay. All right. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording now. And then if you got more questions, you're welcome to come back tomorrow. Otherwise, you can drop me an email or just come to my office hour. All right. It's kind of completely up to you how you want to contact me. All right.
Thank you, Professor.
You're very welcome. I'll see you later, guys. Okay, take care.